podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. So before we get started, I want to say thank you for you supporting the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. Good brothers tuning in and listening to us whenever we post. I promise you consistency will return. It's just that time of the year and that time of life right now. But, summer's coming and we're going to keep it cooking. So, jump in and add on. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother Justice, what's happening?
Oh, man, I'm feeling good. Looking good. You know what I'm saying?
Like my man Dion. You look good. You feel good. You feel good. You play good. You play good. They pay good. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. So, apt reference, just as, we're going to do a little sports talk. You know what I'm saying? This morning, this afternoon, what have you. So we're in the midst of the NBA playoffs. The league that's perpetually theoretically in trouble.
Right.
Like our whole life, it'd be, oh man, the league's in danger. And I'll be like, wait a minute. Like, wasn't okay. I think we'll probably get to part of why that is a conceptual talking point. But I think it was two things. One, just with the playoffs, and then the recent article on Rich Paul. It's just there's a couple things to dive into. So let's maybe just get in on what some going back and forth, just some reflections from the playoffs and the season, I guess, season / playoffs so far for you.
So one, it feels like the season has never stopped. I feel like they've been playing basketball for the last 20 months straight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like basketball stopped and then it went to the bubble. They had the bubble. They took a month off and then went right back into the season.
Yeah.
Which on one level shows you how precarious the financials in the NBA in particular are, right? But yeah, 100% felt like nothing's stopped. And I think that's had an interesting take on, one, the injuries and all that kind of stuff, but then two, kind of how into it you are, right? Because it feels like it's just been one long season, right? So it hasn't been the appropriate pause that I think psychologically people need to get ready to watch the sport again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, give me a couple months. Yeah, give me from June to October. Okay, boom, I got to watch baseball in the middle of the day. I got to watch the pod, in no respect to the Padres. I actually think they're good this year, but let me pick another team that ain't good, and I know ain't good. The Pirates. The Pirates versus insert X team on 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, which is just not make, frankly, some time for good TV. I'm probably haunted by my childhood when the Phillies would be playing and they weren't no good, and they'd be playing the Montreal Expos. And I'd be
Ron Samuel out there.
Oh man, Mike Schmidt, Ron Samuel, Darren Dalton. I'd be wanting to watch anything in the world but baseball at 2:30 in the afternoon and on July 15th. So I'm probably shaking from that. But that's one that the season feels like it never ended, and then the injuries because of the economics of basketball. It kind of takes from the game, right? Because especially in a time with the super teams, right? The implicit thing with the super teams is everybody's got all their big guns, right? But then, and I know people feel different way about the super teams, but the only reason the super team makes any sense is everybody's playing.
Yeah.
But when everybody ain't playing, the super team thing gets boring, right? Like, so you know, you look what happened with the Lakers, you look at what's happening right now with the Suns, right? Like, you know, look at Conley out for the Jazz, look at Murray out for Denver, right? So it kind of takes away, and it always leaves that what if conversation.
Yeah.
Like, what if everyone was at full strength for the full time, right? Which I think kind of leaves something to be desired, even though there's a high level of basketball being played. So that's like my first kind of really like, this kind of feels like everyone's not at full strength. Yeah. So it's hard to compare who would win, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely had a similar feeling with the way, just the timing. And I understand the mechanics of why they had to like, yo, we got to go and get this, basically get this season in so that next season can be whole. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, which makes sense, right? But it definitely was sort of, it feels like the finals, last year's finals was some sort of like preseason tournament to the like, oh man, they won the championship of this season. Which season?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, even my own thought coming out of that, and even how like the Heat's record went, I was like, as hard as they had to play in that series, they ain't gonna be right for a couple months. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like you can't play that hard and then 8 weeks later, like not only just be practicing, but like going back to like do another season. So that definitely made it strange. And I would say for me, one of my first reflections was just watching the season, especially watching the playoffs, is I don't think we all recognize how old some of the stars of the moment are. And I think is what's sort of even feeding in the way that these playoffs have played out, and the impact of injuries, or like who's there and who's not there. It's just that, I mean, even almost all of the, and I probably need to fact check at least one or two, but everyone that we would speak to of as like a star, like superstar level player, is double digits in the league, except for maybe like Joel Embiid, Nim, Joel Embiid, pardon me, brother Embiid. LeBron is going to be year 87 or whatever. You know what I'm saying? He about to come out there in the Uncle Drew outfit. And Kyrie, I think Durant's double digits in the league. Even I think Curry would be like had an amazing year, but was also like I think we're actually at an inflection point where the idea that any of the folks that we would have considered stars 4 years ago are like actually maybe about to this like be the last couple swings, you know what I'm saying, last couple bites at the apple. And
interesting.
I think some will probably experience their mortality better than others. But it does end for every athlete. Like it does, you just can't play forever. And it is diminishing returns. It is impressive though, like for some of the guys, like, I'm actually, low-key rooting for Chris Paul and his crew. I mean, I think if Davis doesn't get hurt, they have a hard time getting out of that series just because it's a bad matchup for them. But I think, otherwise, like, that'd be nice if he could get to the finals. You know what I'm saying? Chris Paul put that on his piece, on the mantelpiece. But but just sort of the transits, I think like we're sort of at the gateway to, in like 3 years. I mean, in very real 3 years, with LeBron could be retired. Which when you think about he came into the league in 2003, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of players from his age that ain't gonna be in the league no more.
Right.
Half of assuming Clay can finally come back healthy, like Golden State maybe got 2 more swings with that crew really being like, with some additions, a viable like tough out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we gotta like, you know, some of these dudes it's just it might be time.
Well, but that's also an interesting point around the transition of the league into the evolving element of the super team, right? Because, for example, 3 years ago, we were talking about Golden State as like, you know, amongst the best teams ever to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you take Clay, Curry, Steph, and what's the name? What's my man name? Draymond, right? Do they beat Utah or Denver right now? I don't know, to be honest. Like, at least them three. Like, Durant's not there. But, like, you take them three, I don't know if they're as good as, to your point about age, right?
Yeah.
Are they truly can they keep up with Jamal Murray and Jokic, right? And Michael Porter Jr.? Could they really beat Devin Booker, giving him 50? You see what I mean? Like, So there is this idea, which is why I think the older stars are doing the super team thing, right?
Yeah.
Because literally they have to play a certain part on teams to actually have a part and actually win, right? So there is this, you know, to your point, there is this shift and changing of the guard. Now it'll be interesting. Do any of the current budding superstars have the personality to kind of move the league, or will the league really be about the team versus the person, right? Because I think there was a time where when you think about the Sixers winning a championship or the Sixers being good for a certain time in the early to mid 80s, yes, it was Doc, but you really thought about the Sixers or those Olajuwon teams, or when the Rockets were good, right? Or the Blazers teams, like those were teams. We went from teams to players, which I think, you know, like to your point, we'll talk about it in a minute. But like, I think we very well could be going back to teams because of the new people, of the new stars, let's say Luka, frankly, even Giannis, like, you know, Jokic, like none of these folks by themselves are like carrying teams. With maybe the exception of Donovan Mitchell and what he did, at least for the first two games, the first series and the first two games. They shut him down last night. But like, you know what I mean? Like, so it'll be interesting to see, will it really be about the team again versus that? Because it is a transition, and a lot of the new people who are really good still need other people. I mean, we all need a friend, right? But
right.
like,
but
they need other people.
Yeah, and I think actually, I mean, just want to hold on to that because I think even with the, you know, the super team dynamic, you know, there's not in most. I think there's only room for so many of those, and then I think the idea that like, the part of me sometimes thinks like, were we in a wave of this amazing level of talent? You know, just terms of like the players that were available, and their skill level, you know, that it's in some ways pulled the idea of how you win and all these other things like over here. But at some point, it's like it would be great if you could find you know, there's only going to be one Kevin Durant,
right?
You can find a 7-foot dude that plays like a small forward. And
shoots like a two guard.
Shoots like a two guard, right? So you find that, then it's like, oh, and you know, this being his second team pairing. If you go one, you paired him at one point with the best shooter I've ever seen in Clay in Stephen Curry, and you know, maybe the second best shooter I've ever seen in Clay. Like, that's not going to happen again. I mean, and even the number of teams that think in their mind, like, oh, yeah, we just get some dudes that can shoot threes. And it's like, it ain't, I mean, yeah, they can shoot threes. They can't shoot like them dudes. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, you know, in terms of theory or structure, you know, the way one approaches building their team. And that I think the league is actually moving to a place where, you know, we're just not, we're going to be on the tail end of those guys, and there'll be some new, individual. Doncic does look, looks like he's ready to do things. I've actually enjoyed what's my man in Atlanta,
Trae Young.
Trae Young's just, not just that he's scoring stuff, but he actually seems to like and embrace the idea, like, yeah, we about to get busy, like, what I'm saying, taking fouls after finishing the Knicks and stuff like that, like, yo, that's good stuff, like good competitive, what I'm saying, let me show you how I really feel.
Right. He likes the game.
Yeah, he likes the, that he's excited about being out there as much as anyone else. And so I think as in like that, I really think, 3 years, it's realistic to assume LeBron is retired or does it's my last season, you know what I'm saying? And then you look, within 5, it's not unreasonable to think Durant could be looking at retirement, Irving, Curry, Clay, and them. I think a guy like Curry, depending on how he plays, just because he can shoot, he might be able to stick around. He'd be on that.
Right.
That Reggie Miller. I'm gonna stay an extra 7 years. That maybe I really wasn't super effective, but I'm out here.
I was gonna say, I think some of them, to your point, I think some of them will just function at reduced capacity, right? Or they're good and they'll give you 20. They're just not. They're no longer the centerpiece of the team, right? Like I think Steph Curry, Clay, Durant. He's already. He's like an injury away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think they just won't be. Well, it's hard for Durant not to be the centerpiece because he's 7 foot and he can shoot threes and he's generally unstoppable. So,
more or less, and then other guys, and what's one thing I think about? It's realistic to me that Chris Paul played 2 more seasons.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to think. We go, oh, well, Harden, you might, all these dudes is over 30. That we would consider the pinnacle guys. Outside of Giannis, I think is still under 30, and Embiid and Simmons, and Simmons, just because of the way he plays, is going to have a different arc because he's not a scorer. You know what I'm saying? So that's
I got something. I got something to say about Simmons in a minute.
It's going to impact. You know what I mean? So I think at the moment. And even the sort of interesting thing about this moment with the playoffs and the way people are feeling about the teams, and even it's been a big conversation this year about the viewership. And I mean, just these playoffs are the only thing right now that has me every week man, maybe I should pay for some live television so I can watch these games without having to I'm gonna go to the gym and sit on the bike and watch the game, or I'm gonna
right.
try to get one of these websites to work where you can sort of watch stuff allegedly.
that Russian website you go to, you got to decode, watch the game for free, and you get every movie
twice.
Yeah, you got to open the window twice. Yeah, you got to get you the extra strength. What's the name that don't allow untoward stuff from other countries to pop up on your page.
Well, I got that. So I got a partner that he's the person that knows how to locate that sort of stuff. And I told him I was like, yeah, man, my web security here in the crib, router thing it's shutting them drones down on my end. So I'm click, 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 and it's nah, yo, what are you looking at, Justice? Stop that. Get off that website, Justice. I'm damn, I'm gonna have to pay for this, right? I think that there's I wonder. I guess maybe this can count as my reflection too. If even just viewership, especially in a league that depends on, your primetime game is Thursday night. Then you got your Friday and you got your Sunday games, right? But in many ways, depends on, live. It depends on a TV schedule that was based on a world where, although I know 4 out of 5 workers still actually do have to kind of be in person. I think it's something like that. But a lot of people, do we have a shift in when people are actually available to watch live sports? And, it's just been my lingering idea that people are oh man, the ratings are way down. And I'm just yeah, it feels like the season never ended and people look at screens all the damn time. So I can imagine And then some of the even things I think that feed in the way people watch sports is like you watch it at a sports bar. Like, you go,
Right.
you go do something and watch the games as much as one may watch at home. And I just think that some of that to me is a reflection of the moment that, you just be in the crib all day. And then it's like, oh, I'm gonna sit and watch a game. It's like, I ain't gonna watch this game. Or you forget. I don't know. I just don't think that it should be taken as a indicator. Oh, fans don't feel good about the player empowerment. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of me that feels that some of that conversation is a bit overstated. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right. Well, and I think I want to put a pin in that because I think that's a really good point. Please, when you bring that up, and I guess my other reflection, one is about 3 different players and something that stumps me about all 3. I can't understand how Ben Simmons can't shoot. I don't comprehend how probably the most outside of Durant, the most physically gifted player on the court 9 times out of 10 is Ben Simmons. 6'10", runs, passes like Magic Johnson, defensive, could have, and I would argue should have been defensive player of the year. Plays the best offensive type person every time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Just unmatched kind of skills. Just cannot shoot. Like how you can go to do a hack of Ben Simmons if it gets rough for the Sixers. I just can't understand that. Number 2, at some point, who is Anthony Davis's trainer? Right? You gotta have a conversation about who Anthony Davis's trainer is, man. Like, and he should go get with that nefarious doctor that Tom Brady be with. Or LeBron's cryo, LeBron's ability to have superhuman endurance and be 37 years old and be operating at this high level. He needs to sign up with them immediately.
Yeah.
Because something is amiss, man. You just get hurt too much. There's no other way to say it. You get hurt too much. And maybe my third thing that has befuddled me about this year was Julius Randle being an all-star and almost damn near an all-NBA player during the season and entirely disappearing playing the Hawks.
Yeah.
Like, the Hawks aren't known for amazing defense as we see in this them playing the Sixers. Right? Now, the Sixers, to be clear, the Sixers have a really good team. They have a shitload of three-point shooters. They have Joel Embiid. I would argue probably say the best center in the league, or 2 or 3. I mean, him, Anthony, him and Joker. Like, you know what I mean?
Anthony wants to be a power forward. You know what I'm saying? He don't really want to be a center.
Okay, good point. So him and Joker, like the top 2 centers in the league, best defensive player in the league, arguably. They got a whole bunch of stuff, but like the Hawks don't play good defense. Like, so for Randall, that has a unique skill set, he could dribble to the hole, he could post up, he could shoot a 3. For him to disappear was like
interesting.
Yeah, it just was clear. It was like crazy how he disappeared. So, but yeah, those are just the 3 ones that I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, and so I'll begin at the beginning one, and it's been, as 6 foot, 1 and maybe 6 foot 2, depending on what sneakers I put on, pick up basketball power forward, Rajee. I'm always flummoxed with basketball, like, real basketball players. And when I talk to people that's, like super into basketball and they play their whole life or they coach each other stuff, and I'll be like, how does one just not learn how to score no buckets at all? You know what I mean? like at all. I mean, and I'm always, I watch today's game, and I think I have my, my theories. Is some, just sort of the idea, like, oh yeah, we're gonna get the whole team of like 6'9", 6'11" dudes that can do everything. They could dribble, they could do this, they could shoot, they could play. And it's sort of like, yeah, but I mean, it's sometimes good when you that big to just be like, I'm bigger than most of y'all. So let me do some of these moves on you. Like, let me work on my, what I mean? It's like when you used to watch Ben Wallace, and Ben Wallace would grab the ball and he would shoot the ball like how, like he ain't never played basketball before. But like, you are actually playing basketball, fam. Like
a shot put. He would shoot the ball like he's playing.
Like, damn, Ben Wallace, like, go play. I mean, I love your defense and your heart and your hustle and all that, but
he played like kids play. Remember like how the tallest kid would play when you was playing basketball? Somebody would get the tallest kid, but the kid literally did not play basketball.
He was just the biggest kid. They're like, yo, get him.
The biggest kid. He's just the biggest kid, man. That's how Ben Wallace.
You know what I'm saying?
On offense, that's how he would play.
So I'm always I think it's just very interesting just because there is there's a mentality the psychology of like how you approach the sport that has always been curious to me in basketball, and what guys just feel comfortable doing and not doing. You know what I'm saying? It's like Dwight Howard with his all his offensive regimen and like was it he say he could shoot better, but he doesn't feel comfortable. Like he actually starts thinking about like, oh, when I miss this, they're gonna like talk about me. And so that's why I'll shy away from this aspect of my game or learning it or developing it. Like it. So with Simmons, and I'm fine with it. Like in one level, if it's like, yo, like I'm not going to be scorer dude. You know what I mean? Now, you don't have to impact the game only by scoring, but it does create a challenging thing when your point guard also needs to be in the paint, posting people up almost, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, in terms of how you defended and, how the other team looks at you. And then it just gets to be like, I mean, you dribbling and all that. Usually dudes that do all that dribbling, can pull up a jump shot. Like, what's up with it? Like, it's frustrating, man. Like, but I love his defense. But it's just like, yo, he just decided, people, it'd be cracking me up because it's been like 4 years of this, it's been like 4 or 5, but it was maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And he might develop his. It's like, man, will y'all stop this? He ain't shooting no threes. Either you're shooting threes or you're not. Like, how long you gonna wait to see how they develop? It might change. Like, nah, man, it's 5-6 years in. This is how he's gonna play the game, and it is a curious thing. I mean, I do, I think him figuring out how to contribute in all the other ways, but it is just still like I'll never totally get it. And it, like I said, I've inquired over the years, and I will continue to inquire with my more, basketball skilled counterparts. Be like, can you explain to me why nobody taught that dude how to do a drop step? Like, why ain't nobody bring up, if you're gonna do two, you're gonna turn into the lane hard that way. Like, once you turn one step that way, you can swing that leg back and use your hips, and then you just gonna be right there. Okay, I'm not gonna bring it up. I'll move on.
Right, and you're the biggest strong, and you're the biggest. And you're stronger than almost anyone that's playing you. Like if someone that's stronger than you is playing you, they're not as fast as you, right? Yeah. And if someone that's fast as you is playing you, they're not as tall as you. You, like, other than Durant, you are the most confusing, befuddling person on the court to deal with because you're 6'10" with exceptional Magic Johnson-like court vision, and can dribble, it's befuddling.
And then Simmons. Second one was what's the second one?
AD and
oh yeah. So I've been thinking about. Yeah, he needs. I don't know who he be doing. I mean, that's so much. I mean, as a regular person, you can go and there's some great physical therapists, people that can help you with the mechanics, and they're like, oh yeah, your bio motion, you got to move your leg like this, do some of these, and do some band work, and there's all kinds of wild stuff out there. You need to get into all of that because I don't know who, and different folks will bring up, well, he shot up 9 inches when he was. I'm like, yo, he was in high school like 9 years ago, 10 years ago. It was a long time ago, fam. Like.
For him to get used to his body, right?
Yeah, like you've had enough time to adjust, like and then some people are just injury prone, and what I've had to actually do a self inventory. So I was like, well, I hurt my hip in high school, and I did tear my ACL. I'm like, I'm dealing with, my current life adjustment, managing my right knee. I'm like, oh man, am I injury prone? Am I injury prone in real life? And then I'm like, nah, I mean, you get hurt, but I was like, actually in between there, I've, stayed for the most part a fairly nimble, I'm saying, above average size human being. And, if I could do it and not do sports for a living, I think AD could do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta get with somebody, start putting you in the cold things and the warm things and they have you doing like the nerve stuff and the jumping on the, we're just gonna touch this toe. We're just gonna move that toe. Oh, let me see how your toes moving, brother. Oh man, yeah, see, that's the problem. See right here where you see how your ankle's moving, you know what I'm saying? And put the thing on your foot and rolling stuff. Like it's all kinds of things out here. You need to do all of that. Because you just can't have like every game you watch. At some point in the game, he has a landing or something, and he's like, It's like, oh, you hurt again? Come on, man. Like, no disrespect, big fella, but come on, man. Like, I know you're the big human, which then gets to my thing around gigantic humans. I don't think gigantic humans having the lever action, you know what I'm saying, the moving around and to think that you're not going to start to have some injuries. Like there's a reason
that makes sense.
That maybe you shouldn't be running full speed all game. You should, some points you should just be lightly jogging. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, y'all, set everything up. I'm going to be right down there. I'm going to be
right.
And
that's a good point. Cause I think about when you say that, I think about, Moses Malone. I think about Jeff Ruland, and that trade that destroyed the Sixers. Where they got Jeff Ruland from the Washington Bullets and actually thought that he was going to be able to be any good. And a lot of those big guys are injury prone. It just, I guess the difference is that was like 1988 where the best, people were playing in slightly elevated technological shoes, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where today, like, people are playing literally in rocket gear, right? They're playing in stuff they give astronauts and shit. So it just feels like the ability, again, because you get a LeBron, you get some of these other players that are playing extra long because of the technological advances, frankly, that we have today, right? In some worlds, LeBron could have been Dr. J, you know what I mean? Or he could have been Alex English, where it's just like, okay, you got hurt. It's time to Terry Cummings. It's time to stop playing. You're really good,
right? But
it's just time to stop. Whereas like LeBron, again, he benefits from that whatever $6 million man stuff he does at home.
Yeah.
I think. But whatever he need to do, AD need to go. I don't know, live with him, or I said, get that nefarious doctor.
I think, and I might be misquoting, but I think in some article in the past, like, I think it's like, like $1 million or something that he spends, LeBron, in terms of trainers and planning and services and everything else just to stay, which is a reasonable investment given that you're a professional athlete. Like, and not, you're not just you're the preeminent, generational, athlete of your time. But, that, every aspect of your physical health the whole year impacts your ability to be prepared to play basketball. And
shit, per capita, here's the thing. Per capita, if you ask the same question about our own, all of us, like, okay, well, how much do you spend on the fact that you got one body, right? You got one car. You can do some stuff with the car, but you only got one car.
Mm-hmm.
If he makes $20 million, if he spends 1/20th of his income, right? That sounds like a pretty good investment.
Yeah. Not a bad deal.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's not a bad deal. To spend 1/20 to be able to operate at a high level to do the thing that's important to you. Probably more of us should probably think like that. To spend 1/20th of our income to operate at a high level.
You know what I'm saying? He get on that, be like your man, TB12 out here to make a business out of it.
Hey, man, TB12 out. Listen, TB12, the funniest thing about them is essentially what Tom Brady does is have a mostly plant-based diet with proteins. He leaves you know, any kind of manufactured or different, you know, stuff in a box alone. If it comes in a box or a bag, he doesn't need it. Like, that's what Tom Brady does. Like, it's not an actual, and besides everyone being like, he doesn't eat strawberries because they're a nightshade or tomatoes. He just doesn't like them. Like, you know, like trying to be like the fact that Tom Brady is successful because he doesn't get extra lycopene. Like, come on, man. Like, that's not it. He just doesn't like tomatoes and strawberries, man. But besides that, Tom Brady's diet and regimen is probably the one that is generally healthiest to have just anyway.
Yeah.
He just spends a lot of money to do it while we don't. So, you know, yeah.
And then the other thing of that, like, just the pin in that part is it goes to bed.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? He's supposed to, like, you know, 8:30. All right, y'all. It's a wrap. Like, what y'all about to get into? You know what I'm saying? You be at Tom Brady house at 7:45. You start looking around like, you know, it's kind of close. You know what I'm saying?
Up with y'all? Yeah. What's up with y'all? What's up with y'all, man? All right, cool. What y'all into tomorrow?
Antonio Brown was in the back room watching Netflix and shit. Like, damn, that nigga Tom go to bed. Tom was playing, man. I thought Tom was joking about that night time.
AB lived with Tom and got his life back together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and then on Randall, it's just I think it's that classic thing that, like, you know, one, I always thought Randall's a good NBA player. And I thought that he would have a good season with Thibodeau, you know, like with a real coach, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, there that, you know, trying to like get the ship righted as you were. And I think if of the players that were on the Lakers in the preceding years before LeBron got there, I felt like he was a player if the Lakers didn't have to, if they could have kept him, that he was a better fit as the, you know, a third dude, you know what I'm saying, or whatever, fourth dude, than what they had when LeBron got there, with Ingram and Lonzo.
Right.
Like if the split could have went different, just because I mean, well, and you know, generally my thought about NBA players, and some people are like, well, maybe, you know, Ingram's gonna find his spot. Like, in terms of people being like a transcendent superstar, it usually 4 years in, we should know. Doesn't mean you're not a good player, right?
Right.
It just means that in terms of you being like the player that's gonna, you know, take the team to the next level, is like, you know, you might be a good second dude. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think when you get in a playoff game, and not just the aspect of the team playing you, you know, 4 to 5, at least 4 games in a row, you know, they can tune in on what you don't do very well. And I think that from a psychological perspective, I always felt like, you know, playoff games, you probably cannot escape the idea that, you know, there's like real stakes if you lose the game, like in terms of like, oh, we're out, like we're done for the season if we lose too many of these. And then like I think that it really, so I just think it, and I'm not saying that like Bruce Randle got in the game, look, I can't win. I just think that it was like, you know, you get to the place where however skilled you are, that it's like, oh, that's right, I am not the dude that can actually transcend these particular circumstances in terms of how I'm being defended, or, you know, how I even, you know, my own preparation, or you miss a few shots and then it's like, oh, I'm, you know, just a bad night. But, you know, you still in the game, man. Like we thought you was, you know, you played a fantastic season and just didn't have it, you know what I mean, for the playoffs. So I think that's that's one of the tie those. Third reflection for me was, we have an interesting dynamic of like, so Jokic, rightfully, given the circumstances, won MVP. And I say rightfully just because he played the whole season. Like if Embiid had not missed all those games, I think Embiid would have been the right MVP in terms of how he played. But he missed, like 16 games or 17 games or something.
Yeah.
And Jokic is dope. like if I know he's in that mountain time zone, which it can be hard for people to watch them games. But if you actually watch Jokic, and I guess just being here in Blazerland, and so they've had these, two really over the last couple of years, kind of these regular seasons where Denver is clearly the better team, like overall, right? Or at least has the edge. But, since, was it 2 seasons ago, the Blazers beat them, to get to the Western Conference Finals. Like the Blazers were able to kind of, Dame being probably the bigger part of it, able to overcome how good Jokic actually is. But for a big dude that does really, really more play like a big man, except that he does, have he does post moves, he does the dribble, he does, he shoots jumpers, does ill passes out of the, from the elbow and from other, he's a real, he's like a simultaneous present center and a little bit of throwback center. Present center in that he can actually shoot a credible 3-pointer, even though it looks like if you ever you go to the gym and be that like tall dude that do like a set shot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it ain't no hop in his 3-pointer, but he'll bang them things on you. But it's like I'm sure people are going to they're going to discredit his MVP as if he wasn't actually playing great this season and that he's a great player, right? They go, oh, well, and a part of that is this underlying idea that we don't always speak to, that if a white, a person of European descent, as it were, is good at basketball, it's sort of some sort of accident, as if people of European descent can't be athletes. Right.
Well, right.
Based on any scientific fact, right? This is only based at our.
No, but I think you make a very interesting point. And honestly, even though we're 30 years into the Eastern European experiment, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're, Drazen Petrovic, Sabonis, right? We're 30 years into the fact that people of European descent from, Eastern Europe are really good at basketball.
They love this game. You know what I'm saying?
They love this game, and they're actually really good. And that's a difference from you having a conversation about Luke Walton, right? Or Joe Ingles, right? Or Jason Williams. Like that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, we haven't gotten over that conversation yet. And it's like kind of how Dirk was treated, even though Dirk had a different element of his game than Jokic has, obviously.
Yeah.
But how it was kind of like, okay, Dirk's good, but it's like, no, Dirk's really good. He's 7 feet hitting fall away threes, right? Like, no, he's really good. But that is a part of, I think, an interesting thing, obviously, of the American context of race, right? Where we stop thinking that people that have been training to be good in a sport can be really good 30 years later.
Yeah.
With almost a laboratory-like way of having the game, right? Like, and that even extends to the Canadians, because, there's always been Canadian basketball players, but clearly at some point when AAU and all these things opened up and Toronto got a team, right? It stopped being a couple guys that were good and started being Toronto is taking players who, yes, in some other context, might have been playing soccer. In some other context, might have been playing some other sports. But they've been watching American television all the time. And now they're playing basketball. And it's been 20 years, so we shouldn't be surprised that someone from north of the border is actually good. Right?
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the thing that, again, not accepting that for many of us in our community, we have been in the laboratory playing basketball. We're not good at basketball because we're instinctively good at it. We're good at it because we've been playing it all the damn time.
All the time.
All the time.
Back to back.
Even when people are good, And even when people are good at other sports, we kind of direct them away from the other sport, if it isn't football, to play basketball.
Yeah.
So no, I'm right with you.
Yeah. And just, so I would like people to just appreciate, he like dude's he's nice. You know what I mean? And just represent Dirk. Dirk's nice, and that Dirk's the best European player we've ever had. You know what I'm saying? And just, y'all, people feel some kind of way about it if they want to. But it's these interesting narratives and ideas, but it's interesting reflection, because I think to me the bigger question is just the idea that the MVP of the season, is this implied idea that, the bigger implied idea that all of these accolades are part of some hierarchy race to be like, on the, like, are you the best player ever? You know what I'm saying? And for some players, obviously, we clearly don't even put them in as having a shot to be in that conversation, right? But then we devalue the accolades when they're outside of the relationship to the persons that we do think should be in that conversation, right? So you have the statement that's made in the NBA around, like, LeBron last time, he should have been considered an MVP for MVP. In which I think if he did not get hurt this season, he was on track to be pushing the fight into it too. Right. But he got hurt, and then some of the, I guess they say the advanced numbers were saying, like, LeBron, he's amazing, he's LeBron, but these other people were doing these other things. It's just a very interesting, weird place with, like, I feel like it's okay to just be happy, like, yo, that dude plays great at their sport, man. Let's just give him some props. I guess the other example I was going to bring up was the Russell Wilson at the top of last season in the NFL, and people were like, man, I can't believe he's not being considered for MVP. All these, and then, like, if you go look at it, you go, oh, I see why. Like, some years he wasn't the MVP. Like, he just, right. It's not. There's only so many, slots. Yeah. So I think. How many reflections is that?
I think we're good. Yep.
Okay.
We're good.
The pivot, though, and I think, I guess, here, because so this New Yorker piece on Rich Paul, owner or principal of Clutch Sports, famously LeBron agent and confidant friend. But there's a couple things in there, and I want to actually start with the conversation around, like, this idea of super teams, because like, yes, like, the Heat team, this was definitely a super team. Like, it was super. They all got that, Durant going to Gold State was definitely super. You know what I'm saying?
MF Doom. Right.
MF Doom, super. With that. And this recent thing with you made Harden basically, what's my man from Damon Wayans and the Great White Hype hitting his way out of Houston. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll be fine. You know what I mean? I'll be ready to play in a minute. You know what I'm saying? And
right.
Getting there. But I also think that basketball's a business. And in any business, contracts are negotiable. And the idea that, just as much as players can go, I would like to leave, 2-3 years out, 3 years out, it does seem like a stretch. And it does give, the team owners, team leadership of the teams, as it were, they could, if they just don't want to trade a dude, they could just go decide they're going to play hardball and, like, I'm not going to trade him. Even though they know that it would be bad for the league if James Harden had to retire because Houston wouldn't let him out of his contract to trade him. Right? Like, that's not a good win for the league right? In what that looks like. And nor would in any other of our major sport leagues, and definitely not in baseball would anybody let that happen, right? But the undergirding sort of like notion that all like players with more leverage can push for things. But on the other hand, I think there's always other players that have almost no leverage. And they can't push for nothing. Like, but we frame the conversation around the maybe 15 guys.
If I wouldn't even say if
like 5 to 6 a year, right? That maybe have maybe. I mean,
LeBron, AD, Harden, Durant. I mean, you could argue probably at some point Giannis could probably do something like that. And be 10 players tops have the ability to actually maneuver in this manner. It isn't, PJ Tucker from the Bucks doesn't have the ability to do this. Tobias Harris from the Sixers does not have the ability to control where he goes, right? Like, let's just be real, right? This is top tier talent. This is otherworldly, so a lot of jerseys talent who even have the conversation around being able to do this. So I think to your point, there's something being framed in an industry where I would argue the top 2% of any industry has the ability and the leverage to make their own decisions. Yeah. And that's in any industry, right? So if it's 15 players per team, it's 25 teams, right? Equal easy math is about 400 professional players, right? That are playing. And these are people playing at the highest level of basketball in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And of the people who we're talking about, of those 400 players, maybe 10 to 15, maybe, have the ability to have this conversation. So literally that equals maybe 4 or 5%, right? Like literally. And so I think that distribution would be found in any industry anywhere. And I don't think that that's because, to your point, the other 95% of them do not have that leverage and go in knowing, and the ownership goes in knowing they don't have that leverage.
Right. I mean, even if we were just talking about Julius Randle. Julius Randle, a great season. He's a good NBA player. If he just wasn't happy with the Knicks, it was like, yeah, I want him. I feel like Knicks aren't giving my chance to shine. I want my chance to, like, Julius Randle can't go in there and be like, yeah, y'all need to trade me to, you need to trade me back to the Lakers so I can help them good. Like for what? Like what, man? Like, Julius, we love you and all that, but you, like, then there's not going to be no shutdown of the Knicks because Julius Randle wants out. You know what I'm saying? Or what's another player at that level? Any of the Sabonis on Indiana, right? Like, only they may be more in the place of, we don't want to pay this player this much money, or our team isn't good enough to at this point, to pay that kind of freight.
They're not transcendent. No, I mean, they are not transcendent. And I think this is reserved for the small percentage of players who are transcendent that this happens with. It just happens to be that the small amount of players who are transcendent in this time understand their leverage points in regard to the money that is being made and the influence, the global influence that comes from them. Again, if we say the 80s Lakers, Celtics, yes, it was Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, made stuff famous, but also it was the Celtics. It just wasn't Larry Bird. It was the Lakers, right? Mm-hmm. That even in those times, those super teams that did become super teams.
Oh yeah,
they didn't always become super teams just because the management was so genius. They traded for people too. right? Some people wanted out of places and they traded for him, right? The Lakers had the ability to pick James Worthy and Magic Johnson.
Right.
And trade for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to create that team. So when we're often looking at how these things came about, it's kind of like it's only reserved for a certain amount of people. But yes, this generation of agents and this generation of players are more sensitive to their worth because we have created the cult of individuality, right? Media personalities have created this space where it's all about you. There's a lot of jerseys being sold, a lot of money being made for a lot of people that they don't always get a cut of. So if they're aware of it, and now with Rich Paul, I think there's even this difference of the player being aware of it versus the broader influence that someone like Chris Paul and Clutch broadly, because I think it's also important that like we do this about Chris Paul, like Chris Paul is sitting somewhere like Magneto or like Doc Doom by himself. Like, frankly, like there's no white people conspiring with Rich Paul to do the things that him and LeBron and Maverick Carter want to do.
Right.
Which I think media often obscures on purpose to have this like it's three black dudes that want to give Whitey hell. Versus if you read, when folks read the article, you see all these people, white people, who have been consulting with LeBron and them for years around the stuff they're doing.
Yeah.
So while I'm not saying that they did not come up with these ideas, clearly, the Four Horsemen and them have done what they have decided. This idea that like that it's three black dudes versus all of the white owners, right? Like no one said this when David Falk was making decisions on who could go places.
Right. And I think it's a really important thing that he elevates in that conversation that like, I mean, ultimately we're talking about business and disrupting a business structure, right? Which I think especially in American history is, I mean, at least especially for our community, has often led to violent reprisals. He's approaching the business different and educating players, elevating like their role, players feeling, I mean, free agency didn't just start, right? And on its face, and the media endorsed it, or at least begged it, the idea that the thing you could do to get loyalty of these players is just pay them a whole lot, so to get away from but then, we're paying them for too long. So, the incentives aren't right. Meaning, they were given them 7-year contracts. And, if it doesn't go well, which sometimes it doesn't, and, or you have to give that big contract to a player who's not as, good as the other guy who got that big contract, it definitely, it taints the vision or the outcomes. So that, like, the league banked on the idea that players would always take more money.
Right.
It would not at any point go, well, I mean, in the short run, I'm not going to get, whatever millions of dollars. In the long run, I'll do this. I'll be happier, right? Like I'll actually enjoy where I'm at, and I'll be happier, and I'll probably be able to make some more money on the back, somewhere later, right? Like, and I'm gonna bet on myself, which I think is a set of behaviors, especially when in the professional spaces. I think when Black people in general and Black men specifically really activate and operate that way, it throws people off. I think they go, wait, what do you mean you're not going to take the money? You're not going to take the contract. You don't want to. You're not going to take the like executive title role that we're not actually clear of what responsibilities you're going to have here. Position, don't you want to be a vice president of whatever at, you name it, law firm, I mean, whatever the entity, if we weren't talking about the NBA, that our professional climate, as it were, corporate America, which doesn't hire a lot of Black people, but will hire some in executive roles, the idea that we will just, if you pay us enough money, then we'll just take it and just be okay with it. And like NBA players and other sports, but especially with the NBA, it is the league that is the most, the most black in terms of the player composition and the talent and the stars, again, which is built on an infrastructure that is rooted in that we play a lot of basketball, right? It's
right.
a lane that has been rewarding for over 50 years. So therefore, it's been developed and grown bigger in terms of what's the back end that's bringing these, developing these talents. So seeing these players become, these individual athletes become basketball players and then stars. And so you get to this spot where the folks that are in that role are like, wait a minute. Like, and I thought it was ill. And then the article is just speaking to that even players are often encouraged and probably still encouraged, but not to hire a black agent. Right? Like,
right.
You get somebody that speaks, does this, that represents these other things. And
that hangs out, right. But in the inference is you got to get somebody that hangs out with the owners that can get you a better deal, because the black person can't get you a better deal.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so much to, if you're if they're going in the rooms, and he's building a business, right? Like he's building a management business and among whatever other, entities in terms of talent and entertainment and production. And it's always going to be a disruption. And there's always going to be things implied. I mean, even I thought the speaking about like folks always framing Clutch as if basically at some point LeBron's in control of it, right? And
right.
the idea that like only with our community would people who we're both, if we're me and you are, say, sneaker designers and we're friends and we're long time connected with each other, and I'm the hot designer, all of the sneaker companies want me, and you are you do materials sourcing, and so therefore, whatever one of us is the biggest star, they're gonna associate like that. Our success is due to whatever our relationship is with some other like famous person that is maybe our spokesperson. Maybe we got,
right.
I mean, they're like, oh, he tried to pick his own sneaker brand, and them two dudes, they just kind of wrong for the ride because they clearly couldn't have spent time and energy becoming talented and masters of their craft professionally, because that's not how that's not how those guys roll,
Well, and it's
wink,
right.
Wink, wink.
It's the narrative of you can be very skilled at. We know there are people coming out of college. I mean, people coming out of high school who are good enough at putting a basketball in a hoop to be able to go straight to the league, right? Like we accept that at this juncture. Now, there's some obviously inherent challenges with that prototype, but we know that can happen. We do not assume that someone could be inherently skilled at understanding communications, leverage, business, and politics, that they don't have to go to a college, not Harvard, not Berkeley, not Northwestern, not MIT, right? Like you, and I don't buy it, but you could still argue that in proximity to networks and in relationships, there is something to be gained from attending a certain set of schools. Mm-hmm. But that's not the premise of Rich Paul's, of the college rule they did. Yeah. The premise of that is you had to go to college.
Yeah.
Like you're right. Like you had to go to a place where you gave someone else a lot of money to sit in a class and take maybe 4 or 5 classes around your major to become an agent. Right? So we accept that you can dribble a ball and you don't have to do that. But we can't accept that you can actually be a good agent and not have to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Or so again, it's so interesting, the implicit ideas that I think in basketball in particular, because there's no helmet on, right? And they end up doing the most talking. And I do think there's still this idea in football that outside of a couple quarterbacks, the field general leader is still the white man, right? Like it's still that person. It's still the Aaron Rodgers. For every Mahomes or Russell Wilson, there's Brady, Mahomes, Roethlisberger. There's Brady, Rodgers, Roethlisberger, what's the other gunslinger? Stafford. You know what I mean? Like there's this idea, in that the genius of the team is found behind the center versus the running back or the wide receiver or defensive end.
Yeah.
Right. So basketball, I think, is a kind of space that's unique in the conversation of, okay, are you saying with all the time people have spent around basketball, right? Again, the last 30 some odd years, there's been somebody being around basketball, right? Whether World Wide West in New York or Leon Rose, whether it's the folks like Magic and them want to own teams. You think no one's figured this out, how to be successful here, right? So there has to be something untoward about Rich Paul. And also because Rich Paul, because he's not part of the fraternity of sorts, that can't be successful,
Yeah. And it gets to the thing I thought that was a salient point, and I actually applaud him for just go ahead and saying it. And then, like, when they were making the analogy, like, that his transition into being a manager, an agent was, the way most people, you work at a firm and you learn the ropes, and then you might break out on your own, right?
Right.
And he just like, I ain't learned nothing at CAA. Like, and spoken to them that, I in terms of being in any corporate and professional spaces, many Black people across the board speak about not being invested, no investment in my development there. I may have taken the opportunity and found a way to get the things I needed to get. But in terms of a proactive effort, like within different professional spaces, that the leadership is, no, I'm trying to actually get you to a higher level and skill, practice, whatever have you. Like, I think what he said there is not an unfamiliar idea to a lot of people who, work in any, what we would call like, not just probably white collar, in a lot of different environments where it's like, yeah, they may have hired you, but they ain't really trying to help you be like great. You know what I'm saying? Right. And I thought it was interesting that Bull was like, "You sure you gonna say that on the record?" Like, yo, man, nah. Let me let me make it be clear. I was in here working. Like they wasn't trying to like, make me a great agent. And I could imagine, and I don't think it's over the years, the AAU coach who gets hired on as an assistant at the school that one of his great players goes to. The other individual that gets an opportunity due to their proximity, maybe they get the opportunity due to their proximity, but as an agent or an assistant or some other like official title, but maybe they're but what they do with it usually ends up being also about like who they are. You know what I mean? Like it's a leverage point to get you in. The same way that for some people, the leverage point to getting in is that you are the you're the child of a well-known previous agent, or your other relational connections, or you went to the right school and therefore you got plugged in with the opportunity to do the next thing. It's like
right.
That sort of dynamic, and I think that's always a part of when someone like Rich Paul is pushing into a space that is, not been dominated by a certain group of people, is that if we're going to do square business at some point, I do have to accept you, right? And then and your community, as it were, being in this space and being my peer. And you know, fair or unfair, I don't think it's a stretch to say that in those rooms you could have folks who may find you individually impressive, but still not necessarily want to buy into the idea that there could be more of you. Right. It's
Right.
like, no, it's just you. So it's like you're like a mercurial.
Like you're a comet. Right. Yeah. You're like a comet, right? Like in treating you like a comet and wanting to treat your ascension as a comet while looking at the farm team of the next 10 to 15 people who will do the same thing that may be of a different race or different background, right? But I think to your point, the disruptor title becomes a very important part of this, because when people in other industries, up until kind of where Elon Musk is going, he's kind of taking it somewhere else. But like up until then, last maybe 25, 30 years, especially in tech, we have honored the disruptor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've said that the disruptor is a person making it better for everybody, right? Democratizing something. Uber democratizes using your car to make more money and be on the road, right? You don't have an asset that's not making no money for you. Regardless of kind of some of the other things about that feeling. But if that's the premise that you accept, right? Or that technology could be beautiful, or that, hey, you don't have to go to the store. There's a website that you can just buy the shit and it comes to your house. And all these disruptions, we've looked at them and they've made a lot of money disrupting traditional industries, right? Mm-hmm. Rich Paul, and then by extension, LeBron, Maverick Carter, coming and disrupting the model that worked well for a certain amount of people, but not necessarily for all of the players. It then looked at as an issue, right? And then, the other challenge here is there was a time where people wanted to play, and if you got recruited to play, and I don't want to use a city because it makes it seem like I'm saying the city isn't nice or cool, but you want to do this, and you're here. But also pop culture and hip hop culture, or I should say hip hop culture and then pop culture, has created a space where everybody wants to be in New York, Houston, Miami, or Los Angeles. That's just where everybody wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in New York or Los Angeles or Miami, the idea, to your point earlier, is that you'll be able to make more on the back end from engagement with business now, right? Than you would in some of these other cities.
Right.
So yes, that's where people want to go now. Like, they don't want to be places where they have to move to somewhere else 3 months out of the year. You can debate that, but just like in every other industry, right? If you want to be close to tech, you're going to live in Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, right? Like, there's not a debate about that. We accept that as part of doing business if you want to maximize your opportunities, right? That's not to say that someone that does tech can't live in Omaha, right? Like Warren Buffett, but it means that Warren Buffett's not looking for tech deals every day.
Right.
The reality of today's transcendent basketball player is that they're constantly looking for opportunities beyond the sport. So yeah, it's going to get to a point where people only want to be a couple places. And especially, as I would argue, hip hop has largely moved to Los Angeles. It's a premise that I'm working with, that like Black music in the 70s moved to LA, but hip hop had not moved to LA. Like, hip hop had moved to New York, then hip hop went to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And while hip hop obviously still strong in Atlanta, the actual commingling of opportunities that exist in hip hop today, you probably got to be in LA. So do it make sense that LeBron wants to be in LA? He's going to finish his career in LA, or, where all these people have homes and have doing things. That's where this is starting to occur. New York will always be New York, and if you can be good in New York, as I hope Julius Randle figures out, he can be special if you can be really good in New York. But like, yeah, I think it's just one of those situations where the disruption of an industry is okay until it's not, right? And it often talks about who's being disrupted and who's benefiting from the disruption that starts to be the rub that we have to look at.
Yeah. And I think there's a something there that you said too when you think of those cities, because there would be a thought to just frame those cities that are maybe the most coveted as just being about being a big city, but Chicago's a giant city and everybody ain't trying to go to Chicago.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
No.
There's no history of Chicago's robust free agent market. Right. And it's not saying there's nothing bad about the city of Chicago. I quite enjoy the city of Chicago.
Right.
But I also could, like, especially at this modern where things are culturally right now, I can see why if you're the league player, like, yeah, I want to be in Miami, I want to be in Houston, I want to be in LA, I want to be in Atlanta, or
right.
Or that's where I want to, frequent, you know what I'm saying, and think about, what your life is going to be, after the fact. And again, when we're talking about the top of the line players that have the leverage to even think like that, you know what I'm saying? There's a whole, majority of players, and why I found that quote that was in there from the general manager that, like, oh, there's, teams aren't empowered. I'm like, you have the contracts. What are you talking about? Like, there's no, it's just, I don't know. I just find that to be ridiculous. They don't have the leverage in every situation. Like, you don't have the leverage over your most talented folks, the folks that are, that have demonstrated the highest value. Yes, you have less leverage over them because they, you actually do have to make them happy at some point. Now, that idea of making them happy is often used as a pejorative, as if making them happy is going to be like, I need 5,000 green M&Ms in my locker room at all times. Like, I'm saying, it's going to be some weird whole bunch of, like, it's just like, yo, that at some point, and even thinking about here in Portland with Dame and folks speculating like, oh, is Dame going to want to go, and is he going to be the next guy to demand a trade? And I don't, I don't. I just don't. Maybe he will, but I don't think so. But the idea that, like, the idea that the team, if you have a player his caliber, at some point shouldn't go, yeah, we need to, like, we should involve you in some decision making, or at least get your input. You know what I'm saying? And even if we have to have that dicey thing of, like, yeah, also though, at any point we could just decide to trade you. You know what I'm saying? If somebody will give, take on he's gonna have a gigantic, I think it's like a $54 million a year one of these next 2 years. So, which was the reason I don't think they ain't getting traded. I don't think he wants to go anyway, but that's a lot of bread. It's like the analogy in my head, and I'm sure some, inside the sports world person would maybe think I'm making a leap, but I just think about it as in an industry in a country that has seeded a long-term idea of the inadequacy of Black people generally, Black men specifically, in terms of their ability to lead, or that if they're good at something, that it has to be due to some sort of innate talent, not necessarily to the diligence of their work ethic to develop their skill and craft. That then when they are being, showing and presenting as the best at whatever that is, that you still want to have decision-making power over what they do, where they go, and how they show up. And if they're forcing, due to the force and power of their abilities, that you have to engage them as peers, that it's a discomfort. I always, the way I think about it too, in terms of where players want to play, is socially, I don't know what it was got to be like to be one of the best basketball, be an NBA player and a good one. And so now you're in the top 1%, the toppest 1% of all black people, not just all people in America. And then you're in a city where there's maybe how many other people aren't on your team or are themselves a professional athlete are operating in the same way financially. Like there's got to be, there's got to be a level of, you can go be in LA and if you're operating at that level, it doesn't, you can move around in spaces where socially it's not a thing. But if you are, I'm sure if you're in a Timberwolf and you want to go out on the town, it's and not like on the town, like I'm gonna go, doing some. I just want to go. I'm gonna go to a nice dinner. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna have a cocktail at an evening establishment. Nothing super ill. You ain't got a lot of peers like that is operating the same level you operating, and that's I would think that would get weird, and you'd be like, where I'd like to live, not here. I think, and then I think on the other aspect in terms of how that interfaces with if you have other financial ambitions, and there's probably more American cities where you walking in the room like, yeah, I've been an NBA player for this many years. I've saved up. I've developed this war chest of funds that I'm looking for investment opportunities, and I'm looking to build something. And you name it, city, NBA city. How receptive is the local business climate to you wanting to become an active player in sort of the economics in the long-term space? They're outside of you giving them your money and stepping out the way. I'm sure it gets a little weird. You know what I'm saying? Like where it's like, you're like, yeah, I'm thinking I want to do some property development over here. And people being like, oh, nah, man, look, just you got $10 million. This is just be an investor on this. You don't need to do any like thought work as it pertains to this project. And I imagine. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I just think, no, you're right. Your opportunity flows to where things are occurring. There's no accident that where there are these opportunities emerging for people to invest, to engage, that's where they're going. Because that's where, to your point, it's normalized for them to have money, right? They're not the only one with money when they're in that city, right? And then the other reality, and this is, real, if you're, I ain't gonna say, I'm sure there's some really well-to-do people in Minnesota, Black people in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But like, if that's the case, when you pop out in Minnesota and you want to be around Black people, the other guys you might be around might have got their money a different way. You know what I mean? Like, if you go to Atlanta and hang out, there's someone who has a real estate company or is, a brand ambassador that might have half as much money as you. If you're in LA, it's a whole bunch of people. You can go hang out with Jay-Z. You go to Santa Monica and go eat with Jay-Z. Right? Like, that makes sense. In Houston, you can go hang out with anybody, Travis Scott. Okay, I'm in Houston. Right? Versus if you're in a lot of cities in America, because of the challenges we know about what it means to be Black in these places and the accumulation of wealth. Yeah. Now, next thing you know, they say, who are you hanging out with? You're hanging out with blankety blank from insert record label that has a nefarious history in the city. And so as these guys, I would argue, are more professionalizing their careers, right? I would say a lot of basketball players are more professionalizing their careers now, right? That's not what they want to do anymore. They know it's more money and more benefit in kind of the above ground space than sometimes the gray economy or mingling with those who are of the gray economy. That yes, they're going to want to be where the opportunities are natural and they flow, and it makes them able to do things, and they can hang out with their idols who tend to be rappers who live in one of those four places too, right? And so I just think the disruption is coming from a lot of different spaces actually, and the reason why it's able to be disrupted because opportunity and access are not equal everywhere across the country for Black people. So if you start to see, when people start to understand that the opportunity and access are not equal across the region, across the area, well then people are going to want to be where those things show up. And you, like I said, you don't want that situation that occurs where it's like, okay, your best player lives in your city during the season, but then leaves to decamp to one of those places in the off season. Right. I think Dame is a difference, right? As strong as his ties are to Oakland, he has very strong ties to the Pacific Northwest, right? And has been clear about having those ties to the region. And I think what that starts to mean is it makes people want to come play with him because he is doing that. But for every Dame, there's a James Harden. You know what I mean?
Get me
James
up
Harden,
out
I
of
think I also think James Harden is an extremely talented basketball player who wants to put a cherry on top of his game so he can just kind of I don't want to say be done with it, but like you kind of get the feeling James Harden, hey, I want to get a ring, man, so I can chill, go hang out with little baby. Like, you know what I mean?
It's not pressing me about this.
Yeah, it's not pressing me, man. I'm just trying to win, man. I need to win. I need to win fast because I'm not going to win here on my own. I'm not going to win in the West of LeBron's here, right? I need to go somewhere where I can get a chip. Y'all can leave me alone. And I can hang out, be a rat, So, I think, but yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Please, for everyone to listen, go check out the article. I think it's definitely, race, the confluence and the interplay of race, culture, disruption in business. I think it's well worth the read.
Yeah, and I guess my closing thought on the piece would be I think it's very interesting to there's some of the details that Paul growing up in a household where his father ran a business, right? So like in other communities we would maybe elevate that more. That he didn't finish school, but it's his father ran a business. He grew up in a household that ran up whatever the business. If there was lumber, if it was fix whatever the business, right? And I think in other communities we would elevate that and add the idea that you probably have learned some things about how businesses work based on being raised in a house where someone ran a business for a living, right? But that before this article, I'd never heard anything about, what I'm saying? Like what his family life like. Maybe that's just what's out there. But I've never heard anyone say like, well, he comes from a family that, run independent business and so he might know some things, right? But, I've definitely been in spaces where other communities are given the benefit of the idea that they've learned from experience from people around them, right? That's familial. And in even framing that the pathway to legitimacy, which is always the challenge for us as Black people, is that wherever we are, we have legitimate cause to be there. We're going to be fighting that. We're going to be fighting that the rest of our own lives because that's just the nature of what's been seeded is that the only legitimate place for Black people is the places we've defined for them. And therefore, if there's somewhere you don't expect them, it's like, hey, what you doing in here? I mean, maybe he's one of the smart Black people, or he must have done something. Okay, I'm just keep my eye on him. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's subtle or overt. And I think I praise the dude. Keep doing his work and do good business. Like do good work, and I think it'll work out for him. But I do encourage people go check the article. So you got a closing thought before let us go?
No, man. I think that's it. I think we ran through it.
All right. So with that, I'm gonna say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother Majestic. The Ask Your Oldhead Podcast and Good Brothers is a creative project that you support when you listen, rate, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also by sharing. You can support the podcast in another way by contributing on Patreon. Every small increment takes a little bit of the production load off of your boy. So yeah, there's that. Please check out that article. Links in the show notes. It's in New Yorker on Rich Paul. And I'd love to hear what folks think about this conversation and about the league. You can check the notes also, any of the social media, Instagram, direct messages, Twitters, whatever. Hit me up. And all things, as we approach the official beginning of the summer. And stay warm if you're in a cold part of the world. Stay cool if you're about to be in a hot part of the world. But always stay safe. And thank you for listening. Peace.